Good afternoon. How am I sounding there in the back? Good? Okay. Well, I'm going to try a couple things different today. One of them is the hardest one. I'm going to actually try to stand still so you can see what's going on.
Probably do calisthenics, warm up.
Well, you know what I did bring is I brought everybody, hold on, some hot coffee. At least you can think warm. If that helps a little, the sight of steam escaping maybe help a little bit. We're trying to change the temperature in the room. I want to warn you today that that's not going to be the only Giphy that you see, or Jiffy, however you want to pronounce it. I don't want to start a controversy. But there'll be a little bit more of that today. So I don't want to cause any epileptic seizures or anything. I could warn you when to look away if you like, but it should be all right. But welcome, and I'm here in the name of Industrial Logic, and also in the name of the Modern Agile community, which you will find at modernagile.org, which is kind of a new thing. It's kind of strange that I'm here talking about this. Is Agile an emerging technology right now? Not so much. 2001 was the manifesto. It started before then. There's a few things, though, that ought to be emerging, so let me kick forward a little. Somewhere, there's this website that has a background similar to this. You might have seen it somewhere, agilemanifesto.org. And it says, we are uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others to do it. That should always be an emergence. That should be something that's always evolving, always changing, always new. If you're still doing Agile the same way you did 5 years ago, was it ever Agile? You know, it's a framework for adaptation and exaptation. So clearly there isn't a standard way to do it that you could hold to forever. But let's not go there right now. We have other places to go. If you check out this website, they provide a couple of ideas that are pretty cool on the front page. One of them is about valuing individuals and interactions. Another one's about the incredible importance of working software, which somehow gets swept under the rug sometimes. It's great when it works. Collaboration, responding to change, of course, the one that I wanted to call out. The whole point is to adapt and change. But let me give you a little history so you can appreciate how not emerging this is. When did it start? Iterative and incremental software development, 1957. Really new stuff, really cutting edge now. Well, maybe on an evolutionary scale, possibly. Rapid application development was one of the lightweight methods, 1991. We skipped to 1996. Scrum came out, but about the same time, something that I like better called XP, which I'm very, very fond of. And then feature-driven development was a little bit later, not too far behind. And then ultimately, we get down to the Agile Manifesto, and then this little thing called Modern Agile. So the history's quite old. It's really not emerging. So we should have learned a whole bunch of things, right? I think it's a good idea. Well, XP started with two important questions. Really, it was just two questions. Kent and Ward and the whole crew were faced with a very tough job, and they realized they needed experts to do the work, so they hired people who were really good. They brought them onto the team. They had two questions, just two. Number one, what has worked well for us in the past? It's a good question. I wanted to repeat some success. So what has worked well? Well, we really think code review is good. We really think unit testing's been helpful, blah, 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 blah. Sometimes it's real frustrating if we're too far away from our customers. So bring them into the room, put them on the team, you know. That's the idea. So the second question was kind of the big kicker, though. And this is the one for if you suffer from epilepsy, you may want to look away. The second question is, how can we do those things much more intensely? By the way, it's hard to be more intense than the way they worked it out. When they say extreme programming, that wasn't some tie-in to snowboarding or skating. That was the idea that they're doing the work more intensely than anyone had before. How can you do unit testing more intensely? Well, why don't we write the test before the code? How can you be more intense than that? I don't know. If we could find that, we would do that. By the way, I want to help you to experience this in a very visceral way. So what I want you to do is, from where you're sitting, look right here at the middle of the screen and say, more intense. Do that real quick and watch the screen. What happens? Does it work? No. If you do it, you'll see it speed up. The start screen speeds up as you do it. You can put your fist in the middle if you want. So there's more intense. And there's a little thing for you to remember. That turned into a whole bunch of practices, which are the XP technical practices, which go from the idea of a whole team to a planning game to continuous integration and refactoring, all the good things that happen. So we had a really great start, and we attributed a lot of our success to the way we were doing the work. So I wrote Agile in a Flash with Jeff Langer, which through Pragmatic Programmers. So if Andy's here somewhere, thank you. Andy helped us make that happen. He was a believer in the project. So one of our cards, we said, well, why would you go to Agile? And we listed these great attributes. We said, get us all on the same page, get some product out the door, drive down the risk, learn, adapt, deliver, take pride, have some transparency, experience the joy of building. But I have to tell you, I think the card's a little bit wrong. The problem with the card is it's a cowboy hat. What I mean is, cowboys do wear cowboy hats. They don't always wear a cowboy hat, but cowboys tend to wear cowboy hats. But sometimes people wear cowboy hats that aren't cowboys. So I had associated these features to Agile development with XP, but really these are outcomes, byproducts, side products, outcomes from the same thing. You could get that any other way. There's a million ways you could get pride in building. There's a million ways you can get product out the door. So it's a little bit wrong, but it's okay. But that's where we started. That's how we saw the world. And then the world kept changing. Now, Agile gives, it's a word that means legitimate these days. That's very sad, right? It's sort of like object-oriented used to mean something about how you organize software, and then object-oriented was a word that meant cool, right? And everybody wanted to be object-oriented. So it changed again. So here's Jerry Weinberg. Things are the way they are because they got that way. So there's a series of transformations that happen along the way. They're worth looking at. So a kind of a Scrum diagram. By the way, there's something here I already hate. In XP, we didn't have a status meeting in the morning. We got together to plan our day. It was to plan the daily attack, not to know who's done what and what they're going to get finished. So I often do Scrum, but I change the one ceremony. Because you know what? Conformance to a process is not that important. All we're trying to do is solve people's problems through software. Right? You get connected to the problem, you try to solve it. Now, we could focus on our perfect internal process, but that seems wrong. So, remember this, when we lose purpose, when purpose becomes unmoored from mastery, mastery becomes our purpose. Have you ever met the code review Nazi? Anybody seen one? Anyone seen the pixel Nazi who noticed that you're one pixel to the left of where the design said? Pixel Nazis. Why? How much is that helping the end user? By 1 pixel. So that is a purpose that's been unmoored. Our job isn't now to help the user. Our job is to make sure that this is perfect, exactly the way it needs to be for our internal process. Have you ever met the Agile ninja who comes through, or the Agile SS that come through because your Jira ticket is a day behind, right? Where does that come from? Where does that come from? So it starts here though, and this is overall a pretty good thing. Roughly 2 weeks, we do some planning, we do some work. There's a lot of code and test in the middle. At the end, we release that code, and then we have a review where we modify our backlogs. Did you know that's what it's for? The purpose of the review is so you can modify the product backlog. Look it up in the Scrum guide. If you're holding the meeting and you're not modifying the backlog, you're not doing it. So interesting point. And we have a retrospective. But then something happens. As we move into different contexts, organizations, eliminate that one box over there that said release, because we're not going to release every 2 weeks. That's ridiculous. Everybody knows that releases are very expensive. You got to print the CDs and the boxes and the users. When's the last time you printed a box with a CD and a user's manual in it? That's interesting. But everybody knows release is really expensive, right? But we're not going to release. Well, that kind of changes the picture. And then another thing happens. Since we're not releasing, we can't get feedback and actually see the code. We're going to have to maybe add some phase gates to protect ourselves against bad code. So this is Asak Singh told us, this is Singh's inevitable avoidance. It's a very important principle that you should always know. If you've got a camera, take a picture now. This is it. When people are not able to solve organizational problems, they tweak the framework to accommodate the dysfunction. Well, I mean, what else are you going to do? So let's start tweaking. I think we can improve this. We just need some release gates and approvals, right? That's going to take time from the developers, but it's okay. It's for a good purpose, right? And after all, we're the good guys. But we're going to need more status meetings. It's really not going to be enough to have a little daily 15-minute if we have all this work to do that's in progress. And then we're going to need more planning, of course, and that's kind of squeezed out the time we have left for retrospectives. But you know, look, we're still getting some code and tests done. But you know what? We're not getting as much code done as we'd like. I know. I read about Henry Ford. I read about Eli Whitney and the cotton gin. It's obvious. You divide up the functions and you separate the people and every person has a specialty. It's going to go faster. So we'll separate the testers from the teams, and then when the developers are done, they'll start handing things over to testers. I have a 10-day sprint. On what day does it go to test? 9, maybe 10. And then they'll be done by the end, right? Oh, I guess not. So here's what the world looks like now. We've got a lot of status meetings and a lot of planning, and the testers can't go to planning because they're busy with last sprint's code, so we don't have testing input. But we're fixing all the stuff they find, and here, look how much code there is in the middle. Look how much work we're doing. Well, it's effective, right? It kind of, I don't know, it seems like... And yet, there's this idea that we have built this software factory that puts out perfectly evenly sized pieces of work, completely ready for consumption every 2 weeks, and it's always going to be fine, just like the factory that makes the Pop-Tarts.
You know, it only works if you put out the same software features every 2 weeks.
Yeah, we could easily do that. We could always just back up the code and rewrite them again. And actually, for the first several times, we would get much faster because programming is 11/12 thinking. And once we've already done the learning, it's just typing. And then we could squeeze it into a tiny little box. That would be great.
Every sprint's a code kata.
So, yeah, it's a kata. It's the biweekly kata. That's great. Thanks, Tim. So, a little while back, I must confess that I sometimes will blog or tweet my pain. And I didn't want to. I like to keep it positive. But this time I was just so fed up. And so I wrote this is on Agile Otter blog, Tim Ottinger's thoughts on software development. I wrote, February 12th, 2014, I want Agile back. I miss it. I remember when Agile processes were Agile. They were cool. And I said, we don't have to settle for expedient. Don't try to read this in the back. I enlarged it for you. We don't have to settle for expediently cranking out horrible work between pointless meetings. It's the kind of Agile everybody should hate and we should avoid. Now, the bad news is some people got mad at me, and then there were a bunch of blogs that were countering my point of view. Then a bunch of people agreed with me, and then they invited me to conferences. And now, here I am. I do 3 talks. One is really interesting. It's about cognitive science and how we can work together as teams and be more productive. I have another talk that I do on refactoring, on how we can make our code so much better, and it's not that expensive to do. And we don't have to focus on perfection. And then I have this one. So I'm a little reluctant, but I kind of like it. I'm glad to bring this out to you. But here's what I want to do. If our Agile's bad, why would we do it? Can we just stop? That would be cool. So let me talk about projects that started and didn't go so well. I borrowed this one. This is from version 1. I love our vendors doing surveys. Because when the people making the Agile management tools, when they produce survey results, that's the first useful thing they've done. So if I'm not picking on version 1, you guys have Jira hate too sometimes. Maybe it's a little bit helpful. I do use some sometimes, but I tend to avoid them. I like paper when possible, or just talking to each other. So why did the Agile projects fail? Let's get the dumb stuff aside. Okay, number 1, lack of experience with Agile methods. And then, I don't know. So a big factor in Agile not working for people is because they don't know how to do it the first time. Am I missing something profound? I think not. Okay, the next one is company philosophy doesn't go with it. Lack of management support doesn't go with the philosophy. External pressure to follow the traditional processes, that's the same thing again. Lack of support for the transition, isn't that literally the same thing? Organizational communication problems, unwillingness to follow Agile. So let me ask you a question. If you really hate doing something, why are we doing it? It's a kind of crazy question, I know, but if we don't like it and we're not going to do it, why couldn't we say no? Because Agile means legitimate. Okay, so maybe talk. Why is it that these things are failing? Primarily, they didn't know how. They didn't try the new way. It's because they failed to learn. So George Dinwiddie, brilliant guy, lives not too far from here, just over kind of DC way a little bit, kind of Virginia-ish. I'll blow that up for you. That's pretty small. Here you go. What is the number 1 problem? There's no time to learn. Our processes have squeezed out all the intellectual work that is 11/12ths of programming. People are just crammed into a box. You're supposed to type and then get it out of there. Everybody's emptying their plate as fast as possible. Is that really true? Well, probably so. Here is somebody, Michael Church wrote why Agile and especially Scrum are terrible. It's a blog and it's all full of venom. I don't know the guy personally. He's probably a delightful human being, I'm guessing. But I like what he said. He said, people are afraid to be caught reading a book or thinking on the job. Wow, what have we come to? This is by Amr El-Samadisi, who is now he's with Industrial Logic. He's in Egypt. And he wrote this blog with a co-author, and he says, Agile methods need to be safe enough, people need to be safe enough to learn from their failures, their mistakes. But the failure itself makes us feel unsafe, and we need to find ways of creating safety. Safe to learn. That's what we need. That's what went away. That's a big part of it. Now, that's a very negative space, so here's some fuzzy otters. Breathe. We don't need to be in the negative space. The problem with the Take Back Agile idea is that it lived entirely in negative space. I'm mad, give it back. Yeah, thanks. Well, what do you do, Tim? I don't know, I just miss it. Very profound. So let's move forward from there into some more positive space. Who is the bad guy that took Agile away? There's never a bad guy. There is no bad guy. There's no Simon Legree. There's no whoever that guy is. Snidely Whiplash. Yes? Okay. The problem really is that people are really, really good with how and what. Tell me how to do this. Tell me what to do. We're really good with that. Have been for generations. So that would be the things on the right side of the chart. Right? Processes and tools, documentation, contracts, following the plan. That's what people are good at. We ask people to do something that they're not good at because people suck at why. Can you do a why for me? Go do why. It is hard. It is hard. So, yet, here's from Woody Zuhl. His wife is the illustrator for the children's books. By the way, look her up. Her books are amazing. Wolf Camp is a big deal. Go look at it. If you have children especially. So profound transformation comes from pursuing profound questions more than seeking practical answers. That's from Peter Block and quoted by Woody and illustrated by Andrea. It's good stuff, but can you sell it? So we have a couple of questions and then we have a couple stories, right? Modern Agile is about questions. and only 4 of them. Because you know what? I think one of the problems with the manifesto is it had 12 principles. How well can you act on 12 principles? Well, one at a time? No. That's hard. Well, what about if it was 4? See, an improvement already. We've simplified. 4 is easy. So we're still in trouble of how do we sell why? And we're going to try this impossible task with a community project of modernagile.org. But let me introduce you to the questions. The first question, is this safe? What does safety mean for software? Well, maybe we shouldn't burn each other up and kill each other and cause people to suffer strokes and heart attacks. That's probably a good one. Maybe we should catch our errors before they escape into the wild. That would be a good one. Maybe we should make software that we know our users want. Standish still says 45% of our features are completely uninteresting to our users. Oh, how much we could save. So there's things that are safe. When the user would like a little more of something and doesn't have it, that's a safe bet. But when I make something they've never seen before, that's pretty risky. Maybe a few safe bets and a few risks together as a portfolio is a good idea. Maybe it'll get us somewhere. That's the first question, and you see a little icon for it. The next question, will this make other people awesome? Well, which people? Is this about end users? Well, yeah. And what about end buyers who aren't the users? Well, yeah, them too. And what about your own managers? Yeah, them too. What about your own developers? Yeah. What about the people who are QA testing specialists in your teams? Yes, them too. What about DevOps? Have you ever seen a project that it was great to develop but horrible to deploy? Let's make them awesome. What can we do to make their life better? How can we make other people awesome? By the way, I think this is fabulous. This almost tears me up. So, will this help us learn and improve? This is National Institute of Standards and Technology. Is that the right? NIST. My acronyms are failing me. I think I have it written down. Science and Technology. National Institute of Science and Technology. They're teaching middle school teachers science and measurement. Isn't that cool? Making other people more awesome by helping them to learn and improve so that they can be better at what they do. This is a great piece of work, by the way, for people in analytics. And how can we deliver value sooner and more often? So, making a big release every year, that's kind of cool. But if that's so, then on average, people have been waiting for some feature that they've really wanted for at least 6 months. Could I have given them that feature sooner? Or could I have given them enough of that feature sooner that they didn't need it so much for the next 6 months or 3 weeks or whatever? So that's the 4 questions that make up Modern Agile. Now, questions are good. Real quick, you could probably scribble down, what about your work safe feels unsafe? How many of you have at least 3 answers already? Right? Who should be made awesome by your work? I worked with a group of people who write software for oncology doctors. They very deeply feel that their job is to help cancer patients live. It's brilliant stuff. How continuously can you deliver? DevOps people, love you. We're a continuous delivery shop. We're not Yahoo. We don't do 50 or 60 times a day because we're a small shop. A dozen is a good day. Some days 0, depends. How can we learn and experiment more rapidly? We have blameless retrospectives. Did you hear the story about Etsy? Etsy's blameless retrospective? So a new developer was working in the CSS and made some changes that seemed pretty benign, passed through all the gates, and it went out live, which is fine except for one thing. Apparently it made a problem on the login page that caused the form not to render. So other than the fact that you couldn't get into the system, it was working great. So they found it, they fixed it quickly, and they gave a prize to the developer and thanked the developer for helping them find the hole in their system that they didn't realize was weak. Isn't that cool? Yeah, I don't think this person retired from software that week. I think that they probably continued on for quite a long time. A blameless retrospective is about the work, not about the people. And we follow this. We also, within Industrial Logic, I'll show you these cards later, but we have some special safety measures that we'll talk about. So there they are. By the way, I'm going to give you these stickers at the end if you want them. So I've got the little ones without the words on them that are nice laptop stickers like that, and I have larger ones too. But let's talk about how it's happening. Who's taking Agile back these days? Strangely enough, a lot of this turns into understanding how to do work, how to do it well. So Christopher Avery is the author of The Responsibility Process. And I would introduce this to you at length if we had the time, but of course we don't. But I'd love to. Basically, everybody says, oh, if only people would take responsibility, right? Have you ever said it? Okay, have you ever taught someone how? Oh, I'm not sure what the process is for teaching people how to be responsible. What an interesting problem. Christopher Avery's taken on that problem, and his work is transforming software teams around the country and management teams. I particularly have been taking it with some of my colleagues into software shops and teaching developers how to take responsibility for their environment, for their work, for the situation, when they just didn't know how. They would have happily done it, they just didn't know how. So, by the way, he has a new book coming out. Watch for this. This is going to be excellent. I've read several preview chapters, and I think you'll be impressed. So that's one thing. Christopher Avery is working, and you see that he's working on, there's a heart for helping to make people awesome, and also helping them to learn and experiment rapidly. So that's a good guy. I just got this one last week. So Primera, I don't know if you're familiar with them, insurance company, they've launched a program to get feedback and act on it every day. This is a group where they have people who are members of the Modern Agile community, and they have volunteered that this is the project they're doing. That's ambitious. Symphonia, right now, my friend Mike Roberts would be here if he wasn't busy talking in a different room. So if you're not here, I hope everybody who isn't here is there. Symphonia is his company, and they're new. But an interesting bit is he's a member also of the Modern Agile community, and he and his partner sat down and said, how are we going to run our business? And the way they did it is they wrote down a chart. Here are the 4 modern Agile values. What are we going to do to make safety? How are we going to focus on making people awesome? How are we going to always structure ourselves so we learn and experiment all the time, right? So you're walking through all 4 of the values. They'll be there. Here's another one. This is an interesting Kickstarter program to get these conversation starters for lean coffees, and people have been using these and have amazing results. Basically, it gives you something to talk about so that you can start to bring your different opinions and your differences together and think about how you work. And strangely enough, it's really helping. I know it sounds like a silly thing, but it's pretty powerful. So the Agile conversation starters for Agile coffee. Have you done lean coffee? Oh, hold on. Off program. Everybody, lean coffee, look at the lean coffee, go online, search for lean coffee. There's podcasts of lean coffees, there's instructions on how to conduct them. It is one of the tricks that I use in our real work workshops to crank the learning up as high as I can possibly run it. Basically for 5 minutes, everybody writes down something they'd like to talk about, then they quickly dot vote what they're going to do, and for each of those topics, you give it 5 minutes, and people discuss it, and at the end of 5 minutes, they vote whether they want another 3 minutes. And at the end of that 3 minutes, they could vote another 3 minutes. But at some point, the moderator is going to say, I think we're out of steam, let's switch. And the whole thing takes maybe an hour, 45 minutes to an hour, you time box it. And you'd be surprised how much learning is in a room if people it's okay to say, hey, I think this is a dumb idea. It's great. Or, I don't understand why we would want to do this. So very, very powerful technique. Get involved. Lean coffees are great. You can do them at work every day if you wanted, or twice a week, or on Thursdays, because nothing happens on Thursdays. The Lean Startup is a major portion of the modern Agile philosophy, of course, on continuous development and experimentation. If you haven't read the book, Reinertson's book on development flow, or Eric Ries's book on Lean Startup, you have something to go chase down. It's a focus on outcomes over outputs. Okay, you cranked out 75 points, that's nice, but what difference does it make? This is a focus on outcomes that we bring into our work. Continuous deployment, everybody who's worked with the continuous deployment, anybody here? Great. Powerful stuff, makes it possible to experiment, possible to learn, and it delivers value continuously, just what we're after. Some of these I have to anonymize. So here's an anonymous story, but a company I worked with discovered they had a really big problem. The people in operations were sleeping approximately 2.5 to 3 hours a night. That's not good for them. And people are, oh, those guys are always so cranky. They're such jerks. No, they're dying, man. You're killing them. So they decided, the CIO said, okay, everybody, here's the problem. These guys need to sleep at night. They need to be husbands and fathers and real human beings, and let's fix that. And so everybody worked, developers paired with operations. We'd had never heard of DevOps at that time. And the goal was to give these guys a good night's sleep, at least 5 nights out of 7, right? And we transformed the thing. All the configuration changed, how the system ran changed. At the end of it, we had a more stable, more configurable, more deployable system than ever before. That was an example of taking on somebody's problem, somebody's cause, and trying to solve it in software. So of course, that's about making somebody else awesome, or at least healthy. It's also about experimenting to learn how to help them do that work and continuously delivering to them so they can continuously deliver to the customer. That's an important story, I think. Coaching beyond the team is Esther Derby, Don Gray, of course, Johanna Rothman and Gerald Weinberg were a part of the story as well. But primaries are Esther and Don, and they are teaching workshops to help people become effective change agents, respectful, careful change agents within organizations. And I think that if you get a chance, go there and see what they're doing. You'll see that this dovetails with what makes Agile great, and it departs from what makes Agile crap. And it's reforming crappy Agile all over the world. Another one we had was a research organization, maybe not too far from here. They couldn't deliver anything to QA until the last day of a sprint. That's evil. That's wrong. So we sat down and they were trying to do a planning session, and I was teaching. And they were like, okay, so how many of these stories do you think we could finish in the first sprint then, if we're going to do sprints? I don't always do sprints, but they do. And they said, they shook their heads, backed up, put their hands up. We can't do any of these. There's nothing here we could deliver in a sprint. Well, how could we slice this down? Tim, you'd understand, there's nothing we could do in a sprint. I thought, well, that seems like an easily winnable situation. We have to make an improvement over 0. I could make it infinitely better, I bet. The reason was because they didn't have engineering builds. None of the developers could build the application. And in fact, the team couldn't build the application. It had to be done by somebody else, which, by the way, they were willing to do that after the end of the sprint and then try to get it to testing. So we built an engineering build and started delivering it to testing. When I said it was okay, let's go do that, turned out that 2 of the developers had been on the side without permission working on it. So by noon the next day, they had an engineering build, and they could deliver to testing every single day. Within a couple of months, they were the team in the company that everybody looked at because they were so much more productive. They just needed permission, man. Of course, have you seen mob programming? Woody's been through town here a couple times already. You should go to one of these conferences, one of these meetups. They're really cool. It is everybody on the team working on the same problem at the same time. Now, if programming were the act of typing, this would be daft. It would be the stupidest imaginable thing. But programming is 11/12 thinking. It's mostly dealing with uncertainty, which is I don't know how to do this or if this can be done, or risk, I don't know what it'll break. So you bring a small group of people together, you get all the perspectives covered, and working together they deliver way more often than most teams where everybody does their own work. So it's a powerful, powerful thing, and it's the other technique that I use in the real work workshops where we do real work on the customer's real code while training them using mob programming, lean coffee, and a few tricks learned from the responsibility process. And it cranks the learning up so high that usually after 2 weeks of that, they're ready to go and transform the rest of the organization. Powerful, powerful stuff. I also know an organization where the developers work directly with stock traders. which sounds like a bad idea to a lot of people, but it's a really good idea. They deliver so often, they're never asked to even do estimates. It's pretty amazing stuff. That is hitting all the boxes on modern Agile. And then, of course, we have all of the controversies of the modern times. So if you take a look, there's beyond budgeting, no estimates, no projects, lean estimates. There's a few others that are out there where people are saying, well, what kind of a system would it have to be so these things that we feel like are taking our time wouldn't have to anymore? What if we didn't have to compete internally for resources in order to do a project? We could just do what's most important to the company and the customer. There's a whole bunch of crazy ideas that people hear that and they say, sedition! Oh, this is sedition! You're trying to rouse up the rebel against the authorities. And they're like, no, this is for the authorities. If you're a manager, think what you could get done if you just did whatever's important instead of having to have estimates out and then hold people's estimates to actuals. And by the way, a simple question for you guys. When the estimate and the actual are different, why do we suspect that the actuals are wrong? Very confusing. Of course, I'm at Industrial Logic. We are engineers. Our focus is on safety. Onzen is a Japanese word for safety, but if I said I was a safety engineer, you'd expect me to install handrails. So no, we use Japanese words. Contractors, consultants love Japanese words. Onzen, engineer. So our job is to build safety for teams. And this has, by the way, been strongly held up recently by a Google study when they found out that psychological safety was the difference between high-performing and low-performing teams. And we cheered them on, yay Google, keep going, make us some more money. And of course, part of our process is this little card. This little card runs on a promise. How am I doing on time? Am I good? Oh, close. So it runs on a promise that if somebody flashes a card, we will stop and have a conversation. Somebody feels like something unsafe is happening, something dangerous to the customer, something hazardous to the health of the team or of our company, to the profitability that we have. Somebody holds up the card. We even have it built into Slack, SWA, stop work authority card pops up. We stop and have a conversation. That's it. Anyone can stop the train at any time to ask a question and say, is this smart? You'd be amazed the situations. We had a guy who, he needed a root canal. He was on morphine, and he was getting ready to go out of the country overseas to teach a week-long class for an important client. And somebody went, stop work authority. Is this incredibly stupid? What are you, on drugs? Well, okay, you're on drugs. What? And it was like, oh, you're right. I have colleagues who know how to teach this material. I should go get a root canal. Not like brilliant rocket science kind of ideas, just simple, stop, this doesn't make sense. And I have these for you if you want to take some with you as tokens. Very important stuff. And we're trying to, in my company, we run according to modern Agile values. We don't own modern Agile. It's a .org. It is a community project. It's being opened up. It's very new. But you can join it. There's a Slack group. There's a Facebook group that's struggling to its knees. It'll eventually be walking. There are other ways to get involved, and there are talks about it all around the country. Teaming and dynamic reteaming, you'll find are hitting the human side of it. And the people who do this wonderful work with Agile retrospectives, including, by the way, tastycupcakes.org. How can you not love a site called Tasty Cupcakes? Right? And of course, we have our podcast. So Agile for Humans, a big player in this space. Go listen. Podcasts are almost an hour long, so you may want to make sure you have a long commute or whatever. Agile in 3 minutes is the shortest podcast that could possibly work. Literally 3 minutes long each episode. The Agile Path is it's kind of like Radiolab for Agile. And right now they're doing a series that's like a search for safety, and they're going to talk about safety and permission and cool things like that. And the Modern Agile Show, which is on YouTube and Facebook and other places. Maybe you might have already been doing Modern Agile and didn't know it. If so, welcome to the awareness. You've got 4 questions. So thank you.